Good evening and welcome to the first of my Stories by the Fire with Fern. I'm reading my own books, but I'm going to start with one called Hidden Treasures, which was one I wrote about 8 or 9 years ago, and it's the first book I wrote with my Cornish characters. So if you haven't ever met them, I'm going to read them in the order that they come, really, over the next 6, 7, 8 weeks. I can only do a few chapters across a week. So welcome to the very first one. I'm going to give, just say 10 minutes for you to sit back, take your shoes off, pour your first glass of maybe wine or just a cup of tea. I've ordered a cup of tea and my daughter might bring me one in a minute. Anyway, here I am every weeknight now from 6:30 p.m. on Facebook, and it's my great pleasure. Are you ready? Ready, steady? Okay, here we go. You thought I was going to say cook then, didn't you? Ready, steady, let's listen. The sound of a tractor bumping over the cattle grid of the farm across the lane rudely woke Helen. Yesterday it was the cockerel at the village farm. She wasn't used to hearing such rural sounds, not yet anyway. Lying in bed with her eyes still shut, savouring the warmth of her duvet and the soft cashmere blanket on top, a housewarming present from Gray, her ex, Helen felt more comfortable than she had in years. Nothing to get up for, nobody to deal with, and the whole day to herself. Ooh, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? She felt her body start to get lighter and was ready to drift off again when the phone rang. Who the... She scrabbled for the receiver. Hello? Mum, it's me. It was Chloe, her daughter. So how's the new cottage and Cornish life? Got all the yokel men beating a path to your door yet? Darling, I have only just woken up. What time is it? 9:45. Well, that's virtually the middle of the night as far as I'm concerned. Sorry, Mum. It's just that I've been thinking about you so much. Are you okay? Yes, fine. Helen sat up and plumped the pillows behind her. But I'm desperate for you to come and have a look at the cottage. It's so pretty. Well, I can't wait. Well, come and see me. How about this weekend? Pressed Helen. Maybe. Sorry, Mum. Got to go. A customer's just walked in. Speak later. Love you. The lovely Chloe, thought Helen, wasting her first-class Cambridge degree in classics by working in a charity shop in Bristol. Her social conscience and a passion to save the world from environmental collapse meant that she was recycling everything, even earbuds if she could. Perhaps she did. Chloe was only 22, but seemed so old for her years, a single-minded, single woman. By the time Helen was Chloe's age, she'd been married a year and had just become a mother to Sean. Chloe came along 3 years later, and now they were all grown up. Sean was something big in advertising, and despite the economic mess, he could apparently afford a Porsche Boxster. Should she worry about her children a bit more, she wondered? No, she said out loud. They can worry about me for a change. Helen climbed out of bed and was thrilled once again by the cream, deep pile carpets that her feet sank into. As her mother used to say, it's never your extravagances you regret, only your economies. Had it been an extravagance to give up her metronome life in West London? She'd amazed herself with the speed and ease of her leap from Chiswick woman to Cornish country woman. 1 minute she was ironing Gray's shirts and playing the apparently contented wife, and the next her marriage was finished. It was almost like a film. They met, they married, they had a family, they had problems, he apologised, she endured, they became friends, they separated. Credits roll. The end. Go home. But home was no longer the London house where she'd raised a family, but I say. Cup of tea from my own daughter. Unlike Chloe, she's a little bit older, but she's still here. And thank you very, very much.
You're very welcome.
Oh, look at that. Got my mum cup. Anyway, I won't bore you with that. I will. Yes. But home was no longer the London house where she'd raised a family, but a wonky-walled cottage called Gull's Cry in the village of Pendruggan. How Gray would hate it. The house was not built for anyone over 6 foot tall. He would need to wear a crash helmet to avoid serious head injury. A towering 6'3", with a large leonine head and a mane of greying hair worn long and pushed back off his face. He was still a very handsome man, with his bright blue eyes and a permanent tan. Most women found him irresistible, yet he had chosen her, reliable Helen. She thought back to the time they'd first met. It was the mid-80s, and Helen was supplementing her meagre income from the BBC, where she was a secretary in the newsroom, by working odd nights in a wine bar in Shepherd's Bush. Gray was one of the regulars. He flirted with everybody. He drank rosé wine with ice, and he was teased by his mates, but he'd just laugh and tell them that only real men drank rosé. He was a partner in an expensive car dealership and drove a turquoise-blue Rolls-Royce Cornish, nearly always with the roof down. Hearing the deep throb of the V8 engine as he pulled up outside, Helen would quickly check herself in the mirror behind the rows of bottles on the bar, and one evening he came in alone, ordered a bottle and 2 glasses, and settled down himself at the bar. He was waiting for his latest girlfriend to arrive, but she never did. He drained the first bottle, ordered another, and turned his seductive blue eyes on Helen instead. He waited for her to finish work, took her out for a curry, and then took her to his bed. Helen had fallen completely, totally in love with him. Sure, she'd had a couple of boyfriends before, but no one had ever made her feel so sexy and protected. Gray, who hated his real name, Graham, liked her lack of sophistication and her dogged adoration. 2 months after their first night, Helen missed a period. She told Gray, who immediately went AWOL, leaving Helen to a fortnight of blind panic, should she tell her widowed dad, terrified it would kill him. So she kept it all to herself for 2 weeks, until one evening a hungover Gray arrived on the doorstep with a bunch of tulips, a paste diamond ring from Shepherd's Bush Market, and a proposal of marriage. They were married within the month, and her father had the good grace to say nothing when Sean arrived weighing 8.5 pounds. Even he knew that was a good size for a premature baby. Helen loved being a mum and a wife. She was a good homemaker and didn't mind Gray's lack of support with nappies or ironing. The dealership seemed to take up all his daylight hours, but she understood. And when Chloe arrived, they moved from Gray's flat to a 4-storey Edwardian townhouse just off the Chiswick High Road. It had a good-sized garden, which she filled with spring bulbs and summer flowers. Then, one weekend, they'd thrown a garden party for his workmates. Her friend, Penny, whom she'd met at the BBC, came to help. It was a really warm day, and she'd put the children downstairs in the cool to have a little nap, taking the baby alarm with her. After an hour's silence, she thought they were sleeping well, but when she went to check on them, she heard Gray's voice through the slightly ajar door. Shh, shh, shh. This was the first time Helen had ever heard him talking to the children so soothingly. She can't hear. I turned the baby alarm off. How thoughtful of him. She pushed the door open and saw Gray, with his trousers round his ankles, entwined with a woman she'd never seen before, summer dress pushed up to her waist, knickers on the floor, one leg wrapped around Helen's husband, and one breast hanging out. She looked at Helen over Gray's shoulder and smiled. Hi. Gray spun round and fell over. Watching him scrambling on the floor, caught up in his trousers and boxer shorts, sent such a feeling of violence through her, she should have been glad that he didn't have a carving knife in her hand. Instead, she checked that the children were still sleeping, and went into the kitchen, where she sat at the table and sobbed. Penny found her there, and after sending her off to bed with a box of Kleenex and chucking out all of Gray's chinless friends, she launched into Gray with such ferocity that he ran to the pub. He came back at closing time to find Penny guarding Helen's bedroom door. I have made up the sofa bed for you in the basement. The kids are asleep and I'll stay here tonight to get them up in the morning. You have got a lot to prove, not least that you will never again be this shitty to Helen, or you will have me to answer to. He had slunk downstairs. Penny stayed for a week, filling Helen with good sense and strength. It took a very long time before Gray shared Helen's bed again or was allowed to touch her. Despite his refusal to talk about what had happened or to answer any of her questions, Helen eventually decided to let her anger and feelings of betrayal go and to give him a second chance. We've had 10 minutes, let's have another couple of pages. The next time it happened, it hadn't hurt quite so much. Or the next. That's not to say that his serial infidelity was not a torture for her, death by 1,000 cuts, but she confided in no one, certainly not Penny, who would have been furious. Besides, Penny had her own problems. She was having an affair with the deputy news editor, who was married. "I know I'm a hypocrite, Helen," she confided, "but his marriage has been over for years, and at least you and Gray are back on track." If only you knew, thought Helen. Penny continued, "They haven't slept together for yonks, but he can't leave her because she's so unstable, and he would never forgive himself if she did anything stupid." "You deserve so much better, though, Pen. How long are you going to wait for him?" Helen said gently. "Until one of you dies?" "Well, I keep hoping it'll sort itself out. I love him so much. I mean, we are so meant to be together." As these things do, they did sort themselves out. The mad, sexless wife appeared at the office Christmas party with blonde hair, a big smile, and 8 months pregnant. This time, it was Helen's turn to look after Penny. She rang the deputy news editor at work and gave him what for in no uncertain terms. When Gray heard, he gave Penny a cuddle and said, "Welcome to the Sinners Club." Over the years, Helen, Gray and the kids, often with Penny in tow, had shared holidays and a friendship that wove a comfortable blanket around them. Helen could always tell when Gray had a fling on the go. It was all very cliched. He paid more attention to his appearance and was assiduous in bringing home little gifts for her. She didn't know why she put up with it, but the idea of divorce and custody battles exhausted her. Least said, soonest mended. Penny, meanwhile, lurched from one unsuitable man to another, but her professional life went from strength to strength. A year older than Helen, she had joined the BBC as a graduate trainee, working as a production secretary in the newsroom, which was where she met Helen. From there, she was seconded to EastEnders as production assistant to the producer, and then swiftly working her way up the ladder to director. Her reputation really took off after she directed a historical drama that became a huge hit on both sides of the Atlantic. And these days, she was head of her own production company, Penny Layton Productions. Helen was thrilled for her, even though her success meant that now their friendship had been conducted on can't always get this right, but now that their friendship was to be conducted via email and Skype. The years had been kind to Gray too. There were always a market for Bentleys and Ferraris among city high flyers, and although the swanky showrooms in Chiswick had long gone, he kept his hand in and sold enough cars privately to keep them comfortable. Sean had moved out to a small flat he'd bought in Tooting, and Chloe was settled in Bristol, leaving Helen and Gray on their own. Then, last Boxing Day, she did the unsayable and asked him for a divorce. Do you want some more? We'll do some more tomorrow. This is the story of Helen and her friend Penny and what happened when they go down to Cornwall. I'm sorry I'm rubbing my nose. I got a bit of dog hair up. Fluff here. So anyway, look, I'll see you again tomorrow night, 6:30 on Facebook. Tell your friends, 6:30 tomorrow evening, cup of tea. Cheers, and thank you for joining me. I'm lovely warm by the fire. I'll see you soon. Hello, welcome to Tuesday and day 2 of Stories by the Fire with me, Fern. I read chapter 1 yesterday. You will find it on Facebook. They come out every evening at 6:30. I'll be here every evening at 6:30, Monday to Friday, for the next few weeks. And welcome. You are so welcome. So here we go with chapter 2. From her bedroom, Helen stepped out onto the small square landing. On her left was the only other door upstairs, a second bedroom that she converted into a bathroom. She headed down the wooden staircase, pausing by the window at the turn in the steps to look out over her wildly overgrown garden. And like the famous gardens of Heligan, this was her own lost garden. Some 50 yards long and 20 wide, it was crisscrossed with mossy brick paths and rectangular flower beds, though it was hard to tell where they ended and the lawn started. Here and there she could see the orange Montbretia licking like flames in the undergrowth. Somewhere, amid the tangle of old man's beard and brambles bursting with blackberries, was an old privy and a couple of broken-down chicken houses. It backed onto the graveyard of Holy Trinity Church. Very quiet neighbours, the estate agent had joked. It didn't bother her at all. There was an ancient dry stone wall between her and the dead, and she had plans to stud it with primroses and ferns. At the bottom of the stairs, a latch door opened straight into her sitting room. The tall and deep open fireplace cradled last night's ashes, which were still gently smouldering. She stirred the coals, added a firelighter and some kindling, then walked across to the door leading into the kitchen. The September sunshine bounced off the shiny lids of the Arga and made the red roses of the Cath Kidston curtains appear to glow. She filled the kettle and set it on the hob. Collecting the newspaper from the front doormat, which was at the opposite end of the kitchen from the back door, she glanced at the front page as she made her tea. And then she loaded everything onto a tray and carried it to her favourite armchair. Plump, patchworked and multicoloured, it sat by the fire and was a startling piece of modern design in her otherwise sedate and classic interior. She added a few lumps of coal and a log to the revived flames and settled down to profligately, deliciously waste an hour with the headlines, the crossword, and her tea. The warm drink and crackle of the fire made her eyelids droop. Soon she was dreaming that she was back in her old life. Gray had just arrived home, bad-tempered and hungry, demanding supper, and while he poured himself a glass of wine, she rushed around preparing his favourite dishes, only for him to announce, "Oh, I had that for lunch. Isn't there anything else? On second thoughts, forget it. I'll have a shower and nip to the pub." For the second time that morning, the phone woke her. "Bloody hell," she complained. "Darling, it's me. How's life with the pirates?" It was Gray. "I've been pillaged several times and am waiting for the parson to bring the baccy," she said. He laughed. "Oh, I do worry about my mate, you know. I do miss you." "No, you don't. What do you want?" "Well, Selina is driving me mad. She's filled my flat with her belongings and I need to get out. Can I come and see you?" he wheedled. "I only have one bedroom, so you'll have to stay in the pub up the road or the Starfish in Trevay." "What do I need to do that for? I can bunk in with you. Good God, woman, I slept with you for a quarter of a century. What's the problem?" "It's the Starfish or the pub." "What time is it?" 11 o'clock. "Oh, hell, I'm expecting Don." "Don who?" "Don Juan? Are you having a little romantic tryst?" "Darling, you'll make me jealous." You were enough to put me off men for good. Let me know when you've decided where you want to stay. Speak later. Goodbye." Upstairs, she ran a quick bath in her luxurious bathroom. Don had done a marvellous job. The Cornish understood what folk from upcountry liked. Years of accepting wealthy second homeowners into their communities meant that they were acquainted with all the latest design fads. Helen would have been happy with a B&Q job, but Don soon persuaded her that what she wanted was a limestone tiled floor, huge white sink, a bath with space-age taps, and a shower with a head so big its pressure was like a riot hose. This was now her favourite room in the cottage. Don had said that he'd be with her at just after 11 to take a look at the new boiler and set the thermostat and timer, which was completely beyond her. By 11:15, she was bathed and dressed, her shoulder-length brown hair was still wet, and her face free of makeup, but she hadn't put makeup on for days. In West London, it was considered rude to be seen without it. Here, in Cornwall, it was considered rude to be seen with it. Don eventually rolled up at 12:15. "Hello, Helen." "Don, hello. I expected you an hour ago." "Yeah, I got here directly. By the way, do you want any bass or lobster? My mate's going out in his boat later. I could drop it over." "Well, yes. How much are they?" "Nothing to me, mate. Don't worry about that." "Well, thank you. Anything that's going, please. Shall I put the kettle on?" "Wouldn't say no." "Oh, this colour's lovely in here, isn't it?" Don had his head through the door into the sitting room. 4 months ago, when she first got the keys to the Girls' Cry, she had a vague idea of chintz and Laura Ashley. but it was Don who steered her to the soft pastel emulsions and barley-coloured painted floorboards, and it was Don who pushed her into buying her big patchwork armchair. "That's what designers call a hero piece, that is," he said. She'd met Don when she first came house hunting in Pendruggan. It had been at the end of May, and she'd driven her soft-top Minnie through the soft, sun-dappled lanes with the roof down. The smell of the wild garlic and salt on the breeze brought back childhood memories that had her hugging herself with joy and excitement, feeling sure she was going to find her dream home any minute now. However, the first few houses she looked at were too dark, too damp, or too expensive. When she'd seen them all and the sun had gone in, giving way to a few spits of rain, her smile had gone and she needed something to cheer herself up. According to her map, she was somewhere between Trevey and Pendruggan. Hungry and needing to regroup, she stopped at the first pub she saw, the Dolphin. It was a proper pub, probably 300 years old and granite tough. Parking her Minnie in the empty car park, Helen walked past the tubs of jolly geraniums, stepped into the dark of the bar, and immediately liked what she saw. An open fire gently burned in the grate. A huge copper bunch bowl full of perfumed peonies stood on the bar, and half a dozen candles flickered in thoughtfully placed bell jars. She ordered a tomato juice and a crab salad from the handwritten menu, and then took her drink to a table with 2 ancient leather chairs and sat down thankfully. When the barmaid brought her the cutlery, she noticed the pages of house details that Helen had placed in front of her. "House hunting, are you?" the woman said. "Yep, but no luck so far," Helen said glumly. "Don," the barmaid called, "is Gull's Cry still for sale down in Pendruggan?" A man with the build of an ex-boxer came through the door behind the bar. "Old Vi's house? I think so. Why? This lady's looking, that's all." Don pulled the tea towel from his shoulder and pushed it onto the bar. "Oh, yeah? Needs a bit of doing, mind. Is your husband good at that sort of stuff?" "I'm looking for myself, actually. I'm thinking about moving down here from London." "Holiday home, is it?" "No, a home. Oh, Pendruggan is a lovely place, mind, but the cottage is small. People want lots of bedrooms, see, to let out." "How big is it?" she asked. "Just a little 2 up, 2 down. Want to look at it? I'll call Neil, the agent who's selling it, if you like." "Well, I'm here, so yes." Don disappeared back into the gloom behind the bar, and the barmaid introduced herself. "I'm Dorry. Me and Don have been here for nearly 20 years. There's not much we don't know about round here. In a good way," she added, seeing Helen's face. "We look out for each other here, you see. Bit different from being in London, I expect." Helen took in the surf-blonde short hair, sawn-off denims and lime-green hoodie with its washed-out, illegible message. She reckoned Dorry must be in her early 40s. "Well, it's a lovely place to live." "Yeah, we get really busy in the summer and then the winter it's quiet, but we love it and the people are real friendly. I take my boys down to the beach to surf in all weathers and always on Christmas Day. Oh, I'm not sure my kids would like that. My 2 will show 'em. Ben's 12 and Hal's 14. Well, Chloe is 22 and Sean's 25. Dorry's face lit up. "Perfect! We got gorgeous lifeguards for your daughter and a lots of bar work for your son." Helen's thought of sweet and earnest Chloe being pursued by bronzed lifeguards. No way. And as for slick, ad-about-town man Sean serving pints of cider in a pub, absolutely no way. Don came back, rubbing his hands together with pleasure. "Spoke to Neil up at the estate agent's. He'll meet you up there in half an hour. I'll draw you a quick map. It's only a couple of miles, but the signposting isn't good. In fact, there isn't any. Cup of coffee while you wait?" It took her 20 minutes to find the village. The lanes all looked the same, but when she finally found the small village green with a sign saying Pendruggan and saw the granite cottage with the for sale sign, it was love at first sight. The front dry stone wall of Gull's Cry had a wonky gate that drooped onto the brick path, and over the years it had worn a groove in the clay. Lavender lined the path to the cottage, and the huge pots of tall acapanthus either side of the front door were heavenly. She stooped to look through the brass porthole set in the middle of the door, but couldn't see much besides dusty floorboards. Neil took out the huge old metal key from his pocket, put it in the lock, and they stepped inside. It smelled of dust and disuse, but no damp. It's been empty a couple of years. The old lady who lived here, Mrs. Wingham, was in a nursery home till she died. The estate have had it on the market ever since. Too expensive for the local first-time buyers and too small for the up-country folk, so they want holiday lats, you see. He let her walk round the kitchen, through to the sitting room. She tried to lie down in the wide window seat. Not quite long enough, but perfect to curl up in with a book. Or a cat. She opened the far door which led to the stairs and made her way up. Polished oak with a circular bend, bringing her out to the landing and 2 bedrooms. The view from the bedrooms was to the front, overlooking the village green, while the window on the stairs gave a view of the garden and the church. After a quick tour of the overgrown garden, she and Neil retired to the Dolphin to discuss terms. When her offer was accepted by the executors, Dorry poured them all a large glass of vodka and cranberry to celebrate. The vodka left Helen feeling unsure about driving, so Don invited her for supper upstairs in their private bit of the pub. Dorry's got a chicken in the oven for tea, there's plenty to go round. Completely seduced by her new house, the village and its people, she followed him upstairs. She'd never seen the landlord's accommodation above a pub before, but this was certainly not what she expected. It was like something out of a glossy magazine. Light and airy with a beachy feel to it. The colours were cream and cafe au lait. The bleached floorboards were strewn with richly coloured rugs, and one wall was adorned with a fabulous painting of boats in a harbour, all broad strokes and bright colours. There was a pile of driftwood by the wood-burning stove, and a coffee table made entirely of wide planks. The sofas were deep and squashy and scattered with slightly crazy cushions, each embroidered with a single rose-pink seagull and embellished with real feathers. Wow, this is amazing! And look at the view! You can see the sea and the cliffs from here. Don looked embarrassed. Well, Dorry and I worked on it over the winter. Do you like it? Well, the floor's a bit wonky, you know, but after I sanded it, we decided it looked all right. It's fabulous! What the London women I know wouldn't give for this. Where's the coffee table from? That? I made it from some old scaffold boards I found. Rubbish, really. You did it? Don, I want my cottage to look just like this. Will you do it for me? And that's tonight's episode. Join us tomorrow for chapter 3 to see how the cottage gets decorated. Thank you very much for listening. See you tomorrow, 6:30, Facebook. Bye. Hello, it's 6:30. It's Wednesday, I think, isn't it? And how are you? Have you had a good day? Everything all right? Bearing up? Well, this is a chance just to have 10 minutes for yourself, 10 minutes nonsense and a little bit of, a story, somebody else's story, and not too sad either, it's all good. So this is chapter 4 of Hidden Treasures. The first book I ever wrote about Cornwall, I wrote it about 8 or 9 years ago, and it's kind of interesting for me to revisit it. Some bits I think, oh, not bad. Others I think, should have done something else there. Anyway, see what you think. Here we go, chapter 4. The smell of wood smoke drifted over from Polly's chimney and mingled with the damp of the conkers lined up in a row on the doorstep. Polly opened the door with a smile. Hello, Helen. Welcome to Candle Cottage. Don't mind the conkers. I put them there to keep the spiders away. Apparently they don't like the smell of them. It's for Tony, the big softy. He hates them. What can I do for you? She greeted Helen with a kiss and showed her into a room decorated with beachcombing finds and filled with vintage furniture. Polly, what a wonderful room. Is that a real crystal ball? Oh, yeah, that's my ball to do the village fairs. I like a bit of fortune telling, but only for fun. Occasionally I'm right. Little Michaela, up the way, came to see me last year with a broken heart and fretting about her GCSEs. I told her that her life would change in 12 months. And now she's got 5 grade Cs and is 5 months pregnant. Bless her, we're all very proud of her. Cup of tea? Well, how about a glass of wine? I've brought you a bottle from Queenie's. Proper job. Let me find some glasses from the whatnot. Polly went to her dark wood shelves and took out 2 original Babysham saucer glasses. How are you settling into village life then? She poured the wine and sat down on a Moroccan puff. I That's a bit funnier than I probably meant at the time. Anyway, a bit quieter than London, I expect. I'll have come round to see you before now, but I was worried you'd think I was being nosy. Well, it's certainly quieter than London, which can only be a good thing, Polly. Actually, I want to pick your brains. I need a gardener, and Queenie suggested Tony, the man from your garden. Does he actually live with you? Well, when his mum died, I couldn't bear to see him on his own, so I offered him the use of the hut, and he loves it. He's a super lad, and will get your garden back on track. Don't spoil him, though, and make sure he knows who's boss. Queenie calls him Simple Tony, is he? Oh, don't go confusing simple for stupid, said Polly. He ain't stupid, but he does have a tendency to take everything very literally. I once told him I was dying for a cup of tea and then had to stop him dialing 999. Polly laughed. I'll send him round to you in the morning and you can show him what needs doing. More wine? They sat and talked until it was quite dark outside. Helen filled her in on her previous life, and then it was Polly's turn. Have you heard about green magic? It's all about working with the power of nature and Mother Earth. Any little potion or spell I can rustle up for you? I find it complements my main work as a paramedic with the ambulance service. You're joking? Absolutely not. I'm highly skilled, won awards and everything, so if there's any magical or medical emergency, don't hesitate to call me. Would you like supper? I'm vegan, mind. Oh, well, that's sweet of you, but maybe next time. Thank you, Polly. I look forward to seeing Tony in the morning. Bye. At 6:45 a.m, Helen was woken by hammering on the front door. Scrambling from her bed, she peered out of the window. It was just getting light, and she could make out the top of a man's head. He was wearing a thick green check lumberjack coat and carrying a spade. Opening the window, she called down, "Hello, can I help you?" "I don't know," said the top of the head, crouching now in order to look through the porthole in the front door. "I've come to help you. Polly said that I was come this morning and do gardening. I'm right, I know. Just a minute." This has to be Tony, thought Helen. She ran downstairs and threw open the front door. "Good morning. It's very early, Tony. I'm not dressed yet." "No, you're not." "Do you want to come back a bit later, in about an hour?" "No, thank you. I'm here to do the garden." "Well, yes, okay. Follow me then." She took Tony out to the back garden, pausing only to slip on her wellies. "While I'm getting dressed, perhaps you'd like to start on the big bed here?" She pointed at an 8-foot square raised bed where the brambles were at least 6 feet high. "Just weed it and clear it, and then I'll be down to help you, okay?" "Yeah." "Would you like a cup of tea?" "No, thank ye. I got me Rabina." He patted his canvas shoulder bag. "Don't hurry, lady. Tony'll be all right." "Okay, see you in an hour or so." Back indoors, Helen struggled to get her wellies off her slightly sweaty bare feet. She put the kettle on and looked at the clock. 6:55 a.m. Realising there was no point in going back to bed, she made herself a cup of milky coffee, opened up her laptop and logged on. There were 17 new messages, 15 of which were spam, but there was one from Penny and one from Gray. She looked at Gray's first. "Darling, longing to see you and get the hell out of town. Can you give me a number for the best hotel you can think of? Better book a double in case I can't escape the bloody girlfriend. Thanks, darling. You're Gray." "I am not your bloody secretary, and you are no longer my Gray," Helen muttered to herself. But nonetheless, she sent a polite email with the number of the Swiss Starfish Hotel in nearby Trevay. The Starfish was exactly Gray's kind of place. In summer, you couldn't move in the old harbour. Oh, sorry. I have earned my living trying to speak fluently. Oh, a bit rusty. Here I go. In summer, you couldn't move in the old harbour car park for Porsches and Bentleys, and the Starfish was always awash with visiting celebrities pretending they were staycationing before they jetted off to the south of France or the Bahamas. The Cornish locals didn't mind a bit. If the townies with more money than sense wanted to spend their bucks down here, well, why not? Never underestimate the commercial nous of a true Cornishman. Then Helen opened her email from Penny. "Hello, gorgeous, how's it going? Hey, you'll never guess what. I'm working on a new costume drama based on the books of Mavis Crewe. Have you heard them? Have you read any of them? She's a sort of poor man's Daphne du Maurier, but one or two of her books have cracking stories. We're scouting for a location in Cornwall, and having a look at the map, I've told the location manager to come and recce your village. I might come too. Can I stay with you? It'll be in the next month or so, so let me know. Love, Penny. Helen smiled and bashed out a quick reply. Yes, any time. Kiss. After she'd taken a bath and made herself presentable, Helen went out into the garden to see how Tony was faring. There was a bonfire smoking by the compost heap, and the rich red soil of the flower bed was turned over neatly with not a weed in sight. Tony was sitting on the upturned wheelbarrow, eating a pasty and drinking his ribena. Is that all right for you, missus? Tony, that's wonderful, said Helen. Shall we crack on with some more? Together they worked for the rest of the day, stopping only for a quick sandwich, chicken salad for Helen and raspberry jam for Tony, until by sunset all of the large raised beds were cleared. How much do I owe you? Well, I'll ask Polly and tell you later, missus. Tony collected his jacket, his bag and his spade and jumped over the low wall into Polly's garden. Helen watched as he walked to the steps of his shepherd's hut. He turned and waved to her, then went inside. She could see him turning on the light and drawing the blue gingham curtains. What a dear man Tony was. Helen thought how lucky he was to live here and not in a big city. In London he would surely be among the outcast homeless, perhaps forgotten by society. But here, among the caring community of Pendruggan, he was protected and safe. She was safe too, safer than she had felt in years. Helen turned and walked back towards the house, straight into an imposing male figure dressed head to toe in black. She screamed. Chapter 5. Shh, it's okay. The man held her arms tight. I've just come to introduce myself. Helen kicked out at the stranger's ankles, and he let go of her, hopping about in pain. She ran to her back door, darted inside, and bolted it behind her. 2 seconds later, there was a gentle knocking. I like to do sound effects. I'm so sorry if I startled you. My name is Cantor, Simon Cantor. I'm the vicar of Holy Trinity Church here in the village. I've only come to say hello. Actually, I think my ankle is bleeding a bit. Helen slid the bolt open and looked at him. Amidst the black of his coat and trousers, she saw the distinctive white dog collar. Oh, my God, you frightened the life out of me. I'm awfully sorry. Shall I come back another time? No, it's fine. Come in. She stepped aside and he walked into the kitchen. Would you like me to look at your ankle? He rolled up his trousers to reveal a white and hairless leg with a long scrape and blood starting to ooze down his shin. Oh, God, I'll get a plaster. Once he was fixed and she'd apologised for her blaspheming, she brought out the sherry bottle and a tube of Pringles. He made himself comfortable at the kitchen table. I knocked at your front door, but as there was no answer and I could see you moving about in the back garden, I walked round to find you. I promise, I don't think I'm a peeping Tom or stalker or anything like that. Helen wondered if she would have been able to describe him to a police artist if he really had been an attacker. He had the kind of face you'd be hard-pressed to recall. He was slim, slightly under 6 foot tall, with chocolate brown eyes enlarged by his spectacles. A shiny, bald head made him look older than he was, but she guessed he was about her age. He smiled at her as she looked at him, a lovely smile, full of humour and sincerity. He had goodness and kindness emanating from him, which was instantly likeable. I thought I'd just pop round to say hello, welcome you to the parish and the church. Are you a churchgoer? Well, I haven't been for a long time. Not that I'm not a believer, it just hasn't been on my agenda for a while. Well, perhaps I could persuade you to come along and meet some of the flock. We don't bite. Simon's Adam's apple wobbled as he laughed. Do you play the guitar or piano? Helen felt panicky. No, not really. Not at all, actually. Why? Well, Christmas is nearer than you think, and we like to put on a bit of an entertainment in the church, raise some much-needed funds with ticket sales. The churchyard needs a lot of work. Some of our graves are very old and getting rather dangerous. The parish council are concerned about headstones falling on children or elderly visitors. It all costs money. He drained his glass and she poured him another. We may also have to move some graves and reinter the remains to make a bit more room. The local archaeologist and county council need to be involved with that. Well, I'd certainly be happy to buy a ticket for the show. Excellent. How many? Just me. Maybe my daughter, if she's down. Well, can we persuade your husband? He looked up with something in his eyes she couldn't quite read. I doubt it. We're separated. Oh, a single lady in the village. Oh, my goodness. I wouldn't want you, or anyone else for that matter, to misconstrue my visit here. More Adam's apple action. I'm sure your wife wouldn't mind, she smiled. Well, you see, I am a single man myself, and as a clergyman I have to be circumspect about my demeanour and behaviour. The village gossips love any excuse. Helen swallowed a laugh and said, well, you're safe with me, I assure you. He looked crestfallen. Not that I don't think you're an attractive man, he perked up. It's just that I'm not ready for anything like that at the moment. Well, it hasn't been my good fortune to find a lady kind enough to take me on. Simon looked at his shoes. Although I live in hope that one day the good Lord will find a lid to fit my pot, as it were. The Adam's apple was on a bungee rope. He took another large slug of sherry. Helen, feeling that she was about to hear his life story, topped up his glass and then her own, and she waited. He turned his chocolate-brown, magnified eyes to her and blew out his slender cheeks. Well, I had a disappointment, you see, a few years ago now, but I still think of her. We met on a trip to the Holy Land, one of those organised excursions, you know. We sort of paired up and found ourselves sitting next to each other on a coach each day. Her name is Denise. She's an RE teacher. Or she was. I'm not sure what she's doing now. Anyway, I knew I had fallen in love with her, and we began writing to each other when we got home. She was in Scotland, not far from her parents, and we ended up speaking on the phone every day. And after a couple of months, we met up in Coventry. The cathedral had a special service, and we both thought it was a good halfway point. It was a marvellous day. The service was really inspiring. Wonderful music and singing. I got caught up in the elation of it all, and over supper, I asked her to marry me. He looked down at his worn cuffs. And she said no, asked Helen. Oh no, she said yes. It was all so exciting. I walked her to her B&B and said goodnight, and in the morning we met briefly at the station before I came back here, and she went back to Scotland to make the wedding arrangements. So what happened? The night before the ceremony, she said she felt unwell and didn't want to go to the rehearsal. I sat with her and she was crying, and I suggested calling the doctor, but she stopped me. He tipped his head back and looked up at the ceiling. It was just that she didn't love me enough to marry me, after all. Helen leaned forward and held his hand as it cradled the sherry glass. I am so sorry, she said. Oh, I'm not looking for sympathy. He took out a hanky and wiped his glasses. But it was a blow. I came here, a very young man, 21, freshly ordained and full of heroic ideals, a job where I could make a difference to society, the opportunity to meet my soulmate. The vicarage is such a lovely family home. It would come alive with people in it, children, that sort of thing. They both sat in silence for a moment, and finally Helen said, I think she made a big mistake. I bet she regrets it every day. Well, that's kind of you, but it wasn't God's will, so he stood up. Church on Sunday. I give communion at the 10 o'clock service if you're up to it. Yes, I'd love to. Simon buttoned up his coat and, after apologising again for frightening her earlier in the garden, walked down the path. As he turned towards the vicarage, her eye was caught by Polly, waving at her from her window next door and giving her a thumbs up. Helen returned the thumbs up and waved back. 2 minutes later, back inside and with a fresh glass of sherry in her hand, she wondered what Polly had meant by her gesture. Surely she hadn't thought that there was anything between her and Simon. They'd only just met. She laughed at the idea. What a joke. And that's Wednesday. I hope you're enjoying this. I'm enjoying reading to you. If Eamon, lovely Eamon Holmes, hadn't suggested I do this a couple of weeks ago when we were on the phone having a chinwag, none of this would be happening. So bless Eamon. He told me that he reads poetry very well, Irish poetry with his lilt. So get on to him and tell him he should be doing it. And Ruth too. Do you know, I think I've known Ruth longer than I've known Eamon, which is, you know, quite a long time, although she's much younger than me, I have to admit. Right, that's it. That's Wednesday. Same time, same place tomorrow? Thursday? Okay. See you then. Bye. Hello. 6:30. Here we are, sitting here for chapter 6 of Hidden Treasures. I don't know why I keep looking at it. I know perfectly well it's Hidden Treasures, but, you know, in these lockdown days, your brains completely go, I can't remember where I've put anything. I can't find anything. You know, every day is the same, isn't it? But we've got to do this. We've got to do this. We don't want to do it necessarily. We want to. I teased my daughter the other day. I said to her, "You fancy coming to the pub for lunch?" And she went, "Oh, I really fancied that." You know, one day we will be saying that, and we'll be going out to the pub and having, I think I'd like a big cottage pie and maybe a cheeky pint. That'd be fun, wouldn't it? Anyway, here we go. Chapter 6. Helen has met Simon Cantor, the vicar, and now she's in the cottage and she needs to set up. Well, you'll hear. Okay, here we go. The following day was Saturday. Helen had survived 2 weeks of her new life and hadn't once wanted to run back to London. It was a gorgeous day and the September sunshine flooded into her bedroom as she drew open the curtains. Today, she intended to rig up a washing line and get some laundry out. The nearest hardware store was in Trevay, so she decided to nip over and treat herself to breakfast while she was out. Lucky thing, wouldn't we all like to do that? The 5-mile drive was a pleasure in itself. Up the steep hill, out of Pendruggan, past the Dolphin, where she tooted at Dorry as she swept the leaves from the pub porch, along the cliff road where she could see the surf whipping off the ocean, and then down another sharp incline into Trevay. With the roof off the little Minnie, she revelled in the splashes of sunlight that dappled the lanes. The local drivers were so different to London ones. They were happy to reverse up the road, where it was too narrow for 2 cars to pass, and if she returned the favour, they always thanked her. Quite unlike Gray, her ex-husband, who was horrendous to drive with. As a passenger, he was a bully, and as a driver, a dictator. He once shouted at an already nervous Helen, when she accidentally curbed the wheels of his latest gas guzzler, "You should not have a licence!" Her journey to Trevay ended without incident, and she arrived safely in the harbour car park. She got out and left the car, roof down, doors unlocked, to take in the beauty of the ancient fishing port. Above her and overlooking the harbour was the Starfish Hotel, built just before the First World War to accommodate the holidaymakers flocking to Cornwall by train. It had fallen on hard times after Dr. Beeching closed the station in the 60s, and cheap foreign package holidays became all the rage. No rail passengers meant fewer holidaymakers, and the old hotel had quietly been allowed to run down. But about 15 years ago, it had been bought up by a stylish and very wealthy widow who persuaded a young, sexy TV chef to take on the kitchens. It was an instant success, and now the shining template for all other faded seaside hotels. Helen thought how much Gray would love it, if and when he came down. She walked across the road towards the harbour wall. The tide was out, and the little fishing boats were resting on their keels in the mud. A seagull swooped down, and with a cackle collected up a dead crab from the silt. Her first stop was to the local chandler's, which was also the ironmonger's. The shelves were lined with cardboard boxes full of everything any self-respecting sailor or builder could want. You could even buy a single screw or washer if necessary. She walked up and down the 3 aisles until she found a 12-metre ball of yellow washing line. She took it to the counter and asked the young man what he would recommend to fix it to the old brick privy wall and across to the back door jamb. He found her some metal screw eyes and swivelly things with some masonry nails and a metal plate with a loop in it, and she thought she understood the instructions and tried to pay particular attention when he showed her a useful knot that would withstand a force 10 gale. Pleased with her purchases and the young man's faith in her abilities, Helen left the shop and walked along the road to the inner harbour. She stood for a couple of moments looking at the way the sun sparkled on the emerald green water. An older couple with a dachshund stopped and did the same thing. The 3 of them exchanged pleasantries. and Helen was introduced to Stuart, the dog, who, after sniffing Helen's hand, turned and cocked his leg on her jeans. The couple didn't seem to notice, and saying cheerio, ambled off towards the town. As the warm liquid travelled into her sock and trainer, she shook her foot and glared at the nonchalantly retreating back of Stuart, swearing under her breath. She heard someone laughing. Turning around towards the sound, she found herself looking straight into the eyes of one of the most handsome men she'd ever seen. Tall and broad-shouldered, he was wearing a tattered and faded red sailcloth fishing smock. A blue and white handkerchief was tied around his neck, accentuating the deep fathoms of his blue eyes. A small gold earring glinted in his right ear, and his jet-black corkscrewed hair was ruffling in the wind. "Did you see that?" she said. "Oh, yes," he replied, his full mouth and white teeth still laughing. "That dog must be an excellent judge of character." She laughed too. "Thanks. I feel as if I have half a gallon of pee in my shoe, but it's probably only a teaspoon." "Well, I hope your day improves." And he walked off in the same direction as the incontinent Stuart, leaving Helen feeling confused. Had she just been teased or insulted? She couldn't decide whether to head back to the car and go home or nip into a shop for a cheap pair of beach shoes, then look for breakfast. Beach shoes and breakfast won. When she came out of the shop, her trainers and socks tied up inside 2 plastic bags, she left the harbour behind her and walked into the little town. The streets were narrow and traditionally quaint. Some local businesses, like the butcher, baker and greengrocer, still survived, but most of the shops were geared to the wealthier holiday visitors. She enjoyed half an hour of window shopping, but didn't succumb, because there was plenty of time for her to do shopping here, the rest of her life, she told herself. Finally, she arrived at an all-day cafe that she'd been to once with Dorry, when she treated Dorry to lunch as a thank you for all her help and input into Gull's Cry. The tables were set outside, and she parked herself at a table for 2 in a sunny, sheltered corner. The waiter came out and took her order for a cappuccino and full Cornish breakfast. "Just the same as an English one, only better," he said. Tilting her head up to the sun, Helen closed her eyes and allowed herself to relax. She was aware of how her new shoes touched the cobbles beneath her, the warmth of the sun on her cheeks. Then she tuned in to the sounds around her. She heard voices, a van door slide open, the clip-clop of a woman's shoes on the cobbles, and a male voice she thought sounded familiar, coming from inside the cafe. "I'll have a black coffee, boy, 3 sugars. How's the summer been for you?" She heard her waiter's voice. "Handsome, but I'll be glad when the visitors have all gone home." "Cool, the last few weeks have been heaving, haven't they?" the familiar voice responded. "You'd think these grockles would want to do more than just mooch about, spending too much money in the shops and eating cream teas and fish and chips. Still, if it pays for us to have a good winter, who cares? I saw one just now. Looked arty type. Expensive handbag and haircut, you know the type. Then a dog peed on her leg. You should have seen her face. Proper townie, no mistake." Helen heard her waiter laugh. "Oh, I'd have paid good money to see that." The laughter continued. Her veins felt as if they were being flushed through with ice-cold water, and yet her face was burning. She reached down to her mulberry handbag and fumbled for her Tom Ford sunglasses. Oh, she must stick out like a sore thumb. The waiter came back out with her coffee and breakfast, followed immediately by the handsome man she'd met on the harbour. His dark, tightly curled hair bounced in the breeze, one hand holding a takeaway cup, the other shoved in his pocket. "Bye, Bernie." "Bye, Piran. Look out for those leaky dogs," the waiter called to him, and laughing turned back into the cafe. "Bastard. Bloody bastard," muttered Helen, turning her face so that he couldn't see her. She ate her breakfast and drank her coffee as quickly as possible. So much for enjoying a leisurely hour people-watching. She paid the bill, left a minimal tip, and drove home, fuming all the way. On her doorstep, there was a large bunch of rusty-coloured dahlias wrapped in newspaper and tied with green twine. A small note read, "Thank you for listening and welcome to our village. Regards, Simon Cantor." Smiling at his thoughtfulness, she carried them into the kitchen and dug out an old Cornish ware jug to put them in. They looked just right, sitting on the stone hearth of the fireplace. After putting some laundry in the machine, including the revolting socks and trainers, she collected her brand new toolbox from under the sink and took her new washing line and ironmongery outside. It was incredibly liberating not to have Grey breathing down her neck, telling her she was getting it all wrong. She hammered and screwed and swore to her heart's content, not caring when she chipped a bit of brick or drilled a hole in the wrong place, and it was fun. After about an hour, she tested the whole construction. The knots seemed safe enough and everything appeared secure on the privy wall and the back door frame. 10 minutes later, she'd hung the first batch of washing out on the line, and she couldn't have been more pleased with herself if she'd climbed Machu Picchu. Back inside, she settled down in her rocking chair by the Aga with a pot of tea and phoned her daughter Chloe. They spent a lovely hour catching up with each other's news, and Chloe fell about laughing at the story of the dog wee. Everyone's a critic, Mum. But she felt Helen's humiliation at the hands of the corkscrew-haired man. Mummy, how horrible. What a nasty man. I hope you don't bump into him again. Well, I'll make sure to avoid him. Not that he'd remember me anyway. There was a knock on the door. Another, hang on, sound effect. I should be harder than that. Knock on the door. Helen looked up through the porthole window of the door and caught sight of a faded red fisherman's smock. No, it couldn't be. Hang on, darling, there's someone outside. She slid out of her chair and ducked down on her hands and knees so that he couldn't see her. She crawled towards the door and very tentatively looked up through the glass to get a clearer view. He was looking down through the porthole directly at her. Chloe, oh my God, it's him, he's here. What? Don't answer it. No, I'll have to. He can see me. Stay on the line. She stood up, trying to look nonchalant, and opened the door. Hello, how can I help you? I thought it was you, the dog-wee lady. He smiled, a twisted, sardonic smile. Yes, that's me. Helen laughed awkwardly. What were you doing crawling on the floor just now? She couldn't think of an answer, so said instead, I'm on the phone, long distance. Is this important? Well, no, not to me, but I thought you'd like to know. Your washing line's broken and your knickers are blowing all over the churchyard. He looked her up and down slowly. Bye then. Right, thank you, goodbye. And she slammed the door. Mum, are you okay? I heard his voice. Quite sexy. Chloe, he might sound quite sexy. He may look quite sexy, but that man is not sexy. Out in the garden, the washing was ruined. She collected it all up and then climbed over the wall into the churchyard to find a tea towel and 2 pairs of the frilly knickers that Grey had bought her for her last birthday. He had always bought her pretty undies. He loved her legs and was never happier than when they were encased in stockings and suspenders. But then he'd loved any woman in stockings and suspenders. She wished he'd stop giving them to her. With everything safely in the laundry basket, she hoiked herself back up over the wall and into her garden. She heard a wolf whistle behind her and turned. That bloody man was in the churchyard, looking at her and laughing. She clutched the basket tightly to her chest and stomped indoors, giving the back door a satisfying slam. Ooh. Right, tomorrow. Tomorrow is, what day is tomorrow? Friday, last day of the week. So I'll read chapter 7, if there's enough time, chapter 8 as well. And if you're enjoying this, then please tell people. And if you're not enjoying it, please don't tell anyone. Stay safe, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye. Hello, and welcome to Friday's reading. This is the last day of this book, or else we'd be here for days and days and days reading it. But I'll start a new book on Monday when you join me. Have you had a good day? I hope so. Yeah, I've just been out in the garden. Sorry, I'm looking a bit windswept. Checking on the jackdaws. I put up a new I didn't. I mean, some nice strong men put up a jackdaw box for me, and they've been flying around asking for a box for weeks and weeks and weeks, and I think I might be too late. There's no sign of them. They're about as, I don't know, reliable as cats, I think, but I'll let you know if they do come. Anyway, here we go. This is Friday, and this is chapter 7 of Hidden Treasures. Here we go. Sitting at his desk in the vicarage, Simon Cantor gazed out of his study window overlooking the church car park. He smiled and returned Piran Ambrose's wave as he drove off in his rusting Toyota truck. Good man, Piran. A bit surly, but a good heart, and he was really helping with the graveyard committee in identifying which plots needed to be renovated, relocated, or simply removed altogether. Just beyond the church was the churchyard, and beyond that, Helen Merrifield's back garden. Simon was in love. She was perfect, a goddess of medium height with what looked like shapely long legs. He hadn't been able to see much because of the gardening trousers she'd been wearing, but he had noticed her full bosom when she'd taken her coat off and stood there in her t-shirt looking at his ankle. Her hair was dark auburn with a natural curl, her eyes amber. Her creamy skin was scattered with freckles, her lips stained as if with raspberry juice, plump and wide. He sighed. Meeting Helen had shaken his orderly world. He'd felt the same when he first saw Denise, and then, a couple of years after the Denise debacle, when he'd met Hilary, a woman in her 30s who came to him for confirmation classes. Week after week they'd sat here in his study, just the two of them, discussing her faith and the challenge of believing in a God who didn't show himself so magically these days. No vivid dreams or burning bushes like in the Old Testament. Her faith had been strong, but she seemed to be having trouble allowing God to accept her as she was. Simon had high hopes of getting her to trust God and eventually trust him too. Then her trust would turn to love, and he would have the wife he so very much wanted. What's that old saying? Simon thought. Man plans and God laughs. Never had it been truer than when Hilary confessed she was struggling with her lesbian feelings towards one of her married colleagues. Sometimes Simon didn't like God's sense of humour. And now there was Helen Merrifield. Her name sounded like crystal water sparkling into a little pool. Cantor S, he heard his Latin teacher's voice in his head. Get on with your work. He looked down at the scribbled notes he was making for tomorrow's sermon. All nonsense. Come on, man, get a grip. Living alone was a wonderful excuse for talking aloud to yourself. Yes, now, where was I? Helen Merrifield. Did she get my flowers? Did she like them? Shall I go over and see her? No, I'll phone her instead. Oh, drat, don't have her number. She'll phone me. I am in the book. And if she doesn't, I'll see her at church tomorrow. And I'll talk to her about stuff, yes. Now, what am I doing? Writing tomorrow's sermon. That's it. I'll put the kettle on. Which he did, and tried to knuckle down to the task at hand, but Simon was unable to keep thoughts of Helen at bay for long. I wonder what she's doing now, he mused. Helen was actually on the beach. She'd followed the path from the village green down the side of Pendruggan farm and walked half a mile across the fields from Gull's Cry to where the Atlantic Ocean swept in and out of Shell Sand Bay. I've lost my place. Hang on a minute. It was a beach where I got myself mixed up there. It was a beach which the holiday visitors rarely found, and it was awkward to trek down to, especially with windbreaks, cool boxes and buggies. But today, in her unfettered life, it was empty. She walked down to the tide line and turned over lumps of seaweed with her wellies, looking for interesting bits of wood or shells. She found a cork ring attached to some green fishing net and a beautiful piece of slate shaped almost like a heart. She put them both in her pocket and then walked down to the sea. The breeze was mild, ruffling her wavy hair. With every buffet, she felt her humiliation at Piran's hands slowly dissipate. The tide was out quite a way, but the swell was big, and she spotted two surfers looking like seals in their wetsuits. They were lying on their boards, waiting to catch a big wave. She took a great lungful of the salty air and reminded herself that this was why she was here, the wildness of the elements and the freedom of a life without responsibility. She watched as the surfers paddled furiously just ahead of a big breaker and then leapt up onto their boards and expertly rode the wave almost right up onto the beach. Years ago, when she'd come to Cornwall as a child, her father had bought her a little bodyboard. He had spent long, patient hours in the shallows teaching her how to catch a wave and ride it on her tummy. She so wanted to do it again. Perhaps she could get lessons in real stand-up surfing, she'd asked Queenie. She stayed for another 20 minutes or so watching the surfers and then returned to home. Back at Gull's Cry, the washing machine had done its stuff and she hung the wet laundry on the drying rack above the Aga. Her attempt to fix up the washing line outside was a failure. The bracket had fallen off. The pulley system installed in the kitchen to haul it all up to the ceiling made a satisfying squeaky noise. And at least, if that fell down, it wouldn't lead to another ignominious episode with the rude man and the fisherman's smock. She put a jacket potato in the oven and got the paper out to see what was on the telly. Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Perfect. A couple of hours later and she was ready for bed. It was only 9 p.m, a bit earlier than she was used to, but that was country life for you, wasn't it? She wasn't getting bored already, was she? Chapter 8. It was 7 a.m. on Sunday morning and the Reverend Simon Cantor was putting on his robes of office. On Sundays, he took a no-frills spoken rather than sung communion at 8 a.m. for those few communicants who wanted the peace of a child-free service first thing, leaving them free to get on with their day. He'd got up earlier than usual today in order to give the vicarage a bit of a spring clean. His weekly help had been off with her hips for a couple of weeks now, and the place was showing signs of neglect, so he'd vacuumed around the vast and largely unused Victorian sitting room and opened the French windows to allow the autumn air to disperse the smell of must and old hymn books that he felt must be hanging around. Then he cut another large bunch of his bronze dahlias from the garden and placed them in a vase on the modest grand piano. Not bad. Next, he gave the downstairs loo a quick bleach and the kitchen a wipe. When he finished getting dressed and came downstairs, he sniffed the air and immediately ran back upstairs to his bathroom. He returned with his aftershave, a Christmas present from Queenie, who'd assured him that David Beckham wore nothing less, and proceeded to squirt it liberally through the rooms downstairs. He sniffed again. Yeah, much better. Taking one last look round, he left to tend his flock. Later that morning, walking over to the church, Helen mulled over the possibility that she might be missing London, or if not London itself, then maybe her friends. So she resolved to get some dates in the diary and encourage them to visit her. Getting ready that morning, she'd looked in the mirror and decided she really ought to make an effort with her appearance. Once she'd applied a little mascara, rouge and lip gloss, she realised that it made her look much better than she had in weeks. She'd decided on a cream and bronze chiffon tea dress, which accentuated her freckles, over the top of which she was wearing a cream cashmere cardigan, in case the church was cold, and she'd kept her legs bare, with tan strappy sandals on her slim feet. The church was 14th century, with Victorian additions, most notably the clock tower. The bell ringers were calling the village to prayers and sending the rooks up into the trees like black plastic bin liners flapping in the breeze. As Helen came out of her gate, Polly and another man caught up with her. They were both in green ambulance uniforms. "Hello, Penny," said Polly, walking alongside her. "We're on call today. We don't like to miss the service. We've got the pager, haven't we, Pete?" The man on the other side of Helen nodded. "You do look nice today," Polly continued. "I was saying to Pete, I wonder if we'd be seeing you at church today, seeing as you and the vicar had quite a long chat the other night." Polly was smiling conspiratorially. The man with Polly greeted Helen with a grin. "Hello, I'm Pete. Pleased to meet you. And so's Reverend Cantor, apparently." "What?" But Helen's voice was lost as, flanked by the couple, she was swept into the church. The entire congregation of 25 turned to look at her. Queenie, who was sitting near the front, waved the three of them over, and they sat down alongside her. For the next 5 minutes, Queenie, Pete and Polly introduced Helen very proprietorially to the entire church, until at exactly 10 a.m. Simon entered from a side door and the service began. As he introduced the first hymn, he gave a little nod of hello to Helen, and there was a definite thrum of excitement from the congregation. The service was a good and simple one, apart from a mild hiatus when Pete and Polly were called out to an emergency heart attack in Trevey. It went smoothly. Helen hadn't taken communion for many years and was surprisingly moved by the gentleness of Simon's touch and the blessings as he gave her the bread and wine. When it came to giving the sign of the peace, he made a beeline for her and held her hand a fraction longer than was necessary, while asking if she'd care to come over to the vicarage after the service to have a glass of sherry with several of the other parishioners. Helen felt she could hardly refuse in front of so many expectant faces. "Thank you. Just a quick one." Simon visibly relaxed and went on to shake hands with the rest of the throng. Come in, he ushered his 8 or so guests into the sitting room. Helen could see that it hadn't benefited from a woman's touch for many years, but she did notice the flowers on the piano and the same musky smell that Simon carried with him. He tried hard to make it welcoming, and she offered to help him hand around the sherry and small cubes of cheese sprinkled with paprika from which he'd just taken the cling film. She was surprised, too, to find she enjoyed herself much more than she'd expected. Everybody was so kind and interested in her. She was definitely the celebrity of the day. She was... sorry, keep losing my place. I do apologise. It's because it's Friday, I suppose. Anyway, here we go. "How do you know the vicar, then?" an elderly man in tweed and corduroy asked her. "Well, it's a very funny story, actually." Simon hovered with a bowl of cashews. "Tell Jack, Helen." As Helen told the story, the room fell silent, as all eyes hung on every word. "I'm glad it was only his shin that I kicked," she finished. "So's the vicar," laughed Jack, elbowing Simon in the ribs. Within an hour, everybody was heading off for their lunch or to the pub, and Simon accepted Helen's offer of collecting the glasses and washing them up in the sink. They chatted comfortably about nothing in particular, Helen enjoying his friendly chatter and Simon enjoying the rarity of female company. "When did you decide the clergy was for you, Simon?" "Oh, it wasn't a road to Damascus moment, I'm afraid," he smiled. "I was going to be a vet at first, and then maybe a PE teacher. But my heart kept telling me it was people's souls I needed to attend to, not their animals or their bodies, and I have never regretted the decision." Helen dried her hands and looked at her watch. "Golly, it's 1:45. I think I must leave you to the rest of your day." As Simon led her back through the dark hall to the front door, she glanced into his office. Books were crammed onto the floor-to-ceiling shelves, and an ancient swivel chair with a squishy chintz cushion stood in front of a disordered but charming oak desk, which had a view over to the church. Leaning up against the adjacent window was an enormous surfboard. "Simon, are you a surfer?" "Oh, a bit, we Cornish boys have to. It's a law, I think." They both smiled. "I might go out this afternoon, actually. The tide'll be coming in about 2, so just right." "The sea must be freezing." "Surprisingly warm right now. October is usually the warmest month. I have a good winter wetsuit, though. Boots, gloves, helmet, the lot." "Well, Reverend Simon Cantor, I never had you down as a surf dude." He looked at his feet and scuffed one shoe over the other. "Well, I'd be happy to take you if you wanted to come." "I can't surf." "Well, I'll teach you. I'm very patient, and by next summer I'll have you ready to enter the World Championships down at Fistral Beach." She laughed aloud, and he smiled back, glad that whatever signals he was sending, they seemed to be working. "Great," said Helen. "Well, let's go this afternoon." Helen nipped home to get her swimming costume and a towel and quickly made a flask of tomato soup to warm them up afterwards. This was going to be fun. A friend to play with at last. She loaded up her beach bag and added a packet of custard creams just in case. Simon was parked outside, his surfboard on the roof rack. She hurried down the garden path and hopped in next to him. As he pulled away, he tooted his horn merrily at Polly, who was weeding her front garden with Pete. The pair of them straightened up and waved. Their first stop was the Trevay Surf Shack, a shop devoted to everything surfy. Helen was poured into a skin-tight wetsuit and fitted with a beginner's board, both of which she could hire for the day. "You'll be wanting these as well, girl," said Skip, the Kiwi shop owner. Flattered at being referred to as a girl, Helen gladly took the boots, gloves and helmet he proffered. "Right, these are the rules." Simon was kneeling on the beach with his wetsuit pulled up only to his waist. Helen looked appreciatively at his strong, hairy chest. Who'd have thought he'd have a bod like that, she thought to herself. Now, the water likes to find a deep part of the beach to suck itself back out to sea. So look at it now. You see where the smooth water is? Well, that's usually where the rip or the undertow is strongest. Always swim where the water is breaking. It's safer. And once you're strong enough, we'll use the rip to get out to the back of the waves, okay? Is this knowledge something that you Cornish boys are born with? No, I used to be a lifeguard. You're kidding. Well, before I finally chose my vocation. You are full of surprises. Is that how you got those abs? He looked down at his body. Well, I run a bit as well. He stood up and swiftly pulled his wetsuit on. Can I just get my balance by holding onto your arm? Helen asked, as she wriggled first one leg, then the other into her suit. Simon was so unused to this kind of interaction with the woman that he accidentally brushed her bosom as he tried to hold her elbow. Oh, I'm so terribly sorry. Don't worry about it, laughed Helen. Can you zip me up? Her slender back was also sprinkled with freckles, and his hand felt weak as he pulled at the zip. Please, 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 God, is this it? He thought to himself. Helen was all for jumping straight into the surf, but Simon held her back. Now, there's one more thing I have to show you, which is how to stand on the board. Lie down and pretend there's a wave coming, paddle madly, and at the right moment, I want you to jump up onto both your feet and stand sideways, okay? Let's go. It was much more difficult than it looked, especially just on the sand. But once they got out, catching the wave at the right moment was incredibly hard. And as for jumping up on her feet in one smooth movement, ridiculous. Her legs felt like jelly, her arms were pulled out of their sockets, and her lungs were full of seawater. Apart from that, it was lovely. Simon was patient and helpful, just as her father had been, but after 45 minutes she was getting cold and had had enough. Her body felt lead-heavy as she walked back up the beach to her bag. She wrapped her big beach towel around her shoulders and sat watching Simon effortlessly catch wave after wave while she drank all the tomato soup. Piran Ambrose stood at the top of the beach with Jack, his terrier, snuffling in the grass of the dunes. Now, what was that woman doing surfing with the vicar? Piran had known Simon since they were schoolboys together. It was Piran who'd got Simon back on his feet after Denise had jilted him. They weren't exactly best friends, but they were mates, and Piran would always look out for him. Simon was someone who didn't deserve to be hurt again. Piran walked down the beach towards Helen. Hello, boy, where have you come from? Helen tickled the ears of the little Jack Russell who was trying to get a custard cream out of its packet. A shadow fell over her. He's mine. He won't pee on you. She knew who it was before she looked up. I'm Piran Ambrose, and this is Jack. He held out his large, rough hand. She stood up and shook it. I'm Helen Merrifield. I'm sorry we met in such awkward circumstances before, and thank you for letting me know about my washing line. It's all right. What are you doing down here with the vicar? Oh, he's teaching me to surf, but I got tired. He's very good. They both turned to watch Simon as a wave crashed over him and he fell off the board. I taught him everything he knows, said Piran. She looked at him, raising her eyebrows. Oh, really? He told me he learnt when he was a lifeguard. That's true, but I was the lifeguard who taught him. His full lips smiled, revealing rather nice teeth. But finding she disliked him more than ever, Helen busied herself with picking up the packet of biscuits and stuffing it back in her bag. What are you doing down here? You're a London woman through and through, aren't you? Husband divorced you, I expect. She stood up quickly, her eyes burning. How dare you? I am divorcing him, actually. She carried on across his laughter. And what I am doing here has nothing to do with you. Well, it does when your knickers are flying about my place of work. She drew herself up to her full 5'6". Mr. Ambrose, it is obvious that we have got off on the wrong foot. I suggest that in future we steer clear of each other. Fine. And with that, he whistled to Jack, waved to Simon and walked back up the beach. Simon strode, dripping towards her. Oh, has Piran gone? She nodded. Oh, damn, I wanted to thank him for all the work he's putting in on the churchyard restoration plans. He's our local historian, you know. He can tell you things about the families here going back hundreds of years. Lovely bloke. I'm proud to call myself his friend. What did he want? I really couldn't tell you, said Helen, smiling tightly. Later that night, when she was on her own, wallowing in a steamy bath by candlelight, she thought about Simon and Piran, one handsome but horrible, the other not so handsome but sweet. How could Simon be friends with that great Hagrid of a man? She lit another scented Jo Malone candle and tried unsuccessfully to banish all thoughts of Piran Ambrose from her mind. And there, my lovelies, I'm going to leave you with that. Yeah, first 8 chapters of that book, Hidden Treasures, the first one I ever wrote. And, well, the first Cornish one I ever wrote. And I was very much a novice, so excuse some of the plot line and excuse some of my reading, but I'm a little bit rusty with that, reading aloud at the moment. Thank you very, very much for being with me. And next week, I'm going to try this one, The Holiday Home, which is about 2 sisters who hate each other. It's quite fun. I quite enjoyed writing that one too. So if you like, I'll be here Monday, 6:30, and thank you. Now stay safe, have a good weekend. Light the fire if you've got one, if it's getting a bit cold. It's still raining outside, but anyway, thank you. I much appreciate your company and hope to see you Monday.